Bipartisan resolution passed by Congress, both houses, that would have forced the end of U.S. involvement in the Saudi-led war in Yemen. While vetoing the resolution, President Trump called it, quote, a dangerous attempt to weaken my constitutional authorities. Let's discuss now with Democratic Congressman Khanna. He is one of the original sponsors of the Yemen resolution. Congressman, appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Thanks, Jim, for having me on.
So here's an effort, and you did get support both in the Senate and the House from some Republicans, but not enough to override the veto. There's been talk for a number of weeks about somehow hemming in the U.S. broader relationship with Saudi Arabia, particularly after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. That's still on ice as far as we can tell. Has Congress failed to rein in this relationship? What else can you do?
Well, we need to take more action, but first, this was a missed opportunity. This is the first time in the history of the country that a war powers resolution has passed both the Senate and the House. Our country is weary of endless wars. Many of the president's closest allies, like Mark Meadows and Matt Gaetz, supported this resolution, and Rand Paul supported it. It's really a shame that he's vetoed it. And at stake are almost 14 million lives in Yemen. The UN has said, Special Envoy Griffith has said, 14 million people face famine. The most urgent issue is for the Saudis to lift the blockade, to allow food and medicine in so that we can avert this famine. There are a few things Congress can do. First, we can consider specific sanctions on MBS. And second, we can consider restricting arms sales.
Right. And it's a fair point because presidents, as you noted, Democrat and Republican, have had very broad authority to wage war in any way they want, really. So this is a marker, hasn't happened before. But on the other side, it appears the administration's strategy with Saudi Arabia is just kick the can down the road, keep pushing it out, and keep things going. You say a next step could be sanctions or ending arms sales. I mean, do you have Republican support for that kind of step?
We do. It remains to be seen how much support, but even Republicans like Lindsey Graham have said we can't just turn a blind eye to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen or the Khashoggi murder. So I do think there is an appetite in Congress to re-examine the Saudi relationship. Everyone understands that the Saudis play a role in the Middle East, and we can't totally abandon it, but we can certainly sanction them for what they did with Khashoggi and demand that their involvement in Yemen in perpetuating the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world end.
The Mueller report, or at least a redacted portions of the broader Mueller report, is going to be out tomorrow. Let me ask you this. What key question do you, as a sitting congressman, want to have answered by this report?
Well, Jim, I want to understand what Mueller's team found regarding the interference with the Russians in our elections. That's something that should concern all Americans. How in the world did the Russians manage to interfere with our presidential process? And second, I want to understand what the Mueller report found on the issue of obstruction of justice. We know that the Mueller report doesn't exonerate the president. The Mueller report refused to make a conclusion. We should see what evidence the Mueller team collected.
Let me ask you this because, as you know, and I've spoken to Democratic and Republican lawmakers who say the same thing. When they're out in the field, they are seldom asked about the Russia investigation today. That patience is wearing thin. By large margins, folks will talk more about health care. They'll talk about their job. They'll talk about trade. Are you concerned that Democrats, not only with their reaction to the Mueller report, but for instance, your committee, the Oversight Committee's request for financial documents related to Trump, tax returns, et cetera, that Democrats risk being a party of investigations when there's not really the political appetite for that, even among their supporters?
Well, Jim, we've done both. We are focused on having an infrastructure bill that will actually build this country. We're focused on a prescription drug bill to rein in big pharma. We've passed legislation on campaign finance reform to get big money out of politics. But while we have a positive agenda, we have a constitutional responsibility to exercise oversight. And that has to be a part of the push for transparency. But I agree with your point that most Americans care, what are you doing about the economy? What are you doing about healthcare? What are you doing about jobs? And most of our effort in Congress should be focused on solving those problems.
Final question. President Trump has defended his tweet of a video showing your Democratic colleague, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, mixed with images of the 9/11 attack. Some are saying taking comments out of context as she described that attack. Do you believe that the president, do you believe that his supporters, the administration, and some of your Republican colleagues have been unfair with her, or do you believe that she has spoken out of turn on these issues?
Well, there's no reason the President of the United States should be tweeting out that video. And you have to understand the power differential. I mean, here you're talking about a freshman member of Congress, a woman of color, and the President of the United States, the most powerful person in the world. So he should understand that those types of actions put people in danger. And I'm glad that Speaker Pelosi has stepped up to have more security for Ilhan Omar.
Congressman Khanna, appreciate having you on the show this morning.